Get this coffee off my desk and get out of my face before I have you fired today." Joe Anana stood in the doorway of the corner office, holding a cup of coffee that was still steaming hot. The man behind the desk did not look up from his computer screen. His name was Michael Harrington, and he ran Apex Industries with an iron fist. He was tall, gray-haired, and wore suits that cost more than most people made in a month. Joe set the coffee down gently on the corner of the desk, right where the morning light hit the wood. He was 23 years old, dressed in a simple navy suit that he bought at a discount store downtown. His badge said Summer Intern in small letters that everyone seemed to notice right away. Michael finally looked up, and his eyes moved over Joe like he was looking at a piece of furniture. His lip curled just a little bit, and he waved his hand toward the door like he was shooing away a fly. "I didn't ask for an intern to bring my coffee, and I certainly didn't ask for you to stand there staring at me." Joe kept his face calm and still, the same way he had learned to do in situations just like this one. He had been at Apex Industries for 3 weeks now, and Michael Harrington had not spoken directly to him until today. Every other time, Michael walked past Joe like he was invisible, like he was part of the wall decoration. "I was just dropping off the quarterly reports, sir, and your assistant asked me to bring the coffee along with them." Michael grabbed the folder from the desk and tossed it into his trash can without even opening it to look inside. "I don't read reports from interns, and I don't drink coffee from people I don't know, so you can leave now." Joe nodded once, turned around, and walked out of the office without saying another word to the CEO of Apex Industries. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and he stood in the hallway for just a moment. The other employees looked away quickly, pretending they had not seen what just happened inside that corner office. Sarah Chen, who worked in the finance department, caught Joe by the arm as he walked past her desk near the windows. "I am so sorry you had to deal with that, because Michael treats everyone like dirt under his expensive shoes around here." Joe smiled at her, a real smile that reached his eyes, and patted her hand gently before pulling his arm away. "It is okay, Sarah, because I have dealt with much worse than a rude man in a fancy suit before today." What Sarah did not know, what nobody at Apex Industries knew, was that Joe Anana was not really a summer intern at all. He was the grandson of Benjamin Anana, who had founded this very company 52 years ago in a small warehouse downtown. Benjamin had built Apex from nothing into a company worth $3.7 billion today. Joe carried a letter in his jacket pocket at all times, a letter that his grandfather had written just before he died last year. The letter explained everything, including the fact that Joe owned 41% of Apex Industries stock in a trust. Michael Harrington had bought his way into the CEO position 8 years ago after Benjamin got sick and stepped down from running things. The board meeting was scheduled for tomorrow at 9 in the morning, and Joe had a plan that he had been working on for months. That night, Joe sat alone in his small apartment on the east side of the city, looking at old photographs spread across his kitchen table. There was his grandfather as a young man, standing in front of a tiny warehouse with a hand-painted sign that said Apex Industries. There was his mother, Patricia, beautiful and smiling in her graduation gown, the day she finished college at the top of her class. She had died when Joe was only 10 years old, taken by a sickness that came fast and showed no mercy at all. And there was Joe himself as a little boy, sitting on his grandfather's knee, learning about business and life and how to be a good man. Benjamin Anana had raised Joe after Patricia died, and he had taught him everything he knew about running a company right. "Never let them see you sweat, boy," his grandfather used to say every night before Joe went to bed in his room. "And never let them know what cards you're holding until it's time to lay them down on the table for everyone to see." Joe picked up the letter his grandfather had left him, the paper worn soft from being read so many times over the past year. "Dear Joe," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then I have gone to join your mother in whatever comes next for us." Joe read the words slowly, even though he knew them by heart and could recite them in his sleep without any effort at all. "I have left you the company, but I want you to earn it first, because nothing worth having comes easy in this world." His grandfather had planned everything, including the blind trust that would transfer ownership to Joe on his 23rd birthday last month. Go to Apex as an intern and see what Michael Harrington has done to the company I built with my own two hands here. Joe folded the letter and put it back in his pocket, right next to his heart where it belonged, safe and sound. He looked at the stack of evidence on his table, recordings and documents that proved Michael had been stealing millions from Apex for years. Tomorrow, everything would change, and Joe was ready to show the world who he really was inside and outside of the office. The next day came faster than anyone expected, and the sun rose over the glass towers of the financial district bright and early. Joe arrived at the office at 7:30, wearing the same navy discount suit he always wore to work every day without fail. He carried his messenger bag over one shoulder and nodded to the security guard at the front desk downstairs in the lobby. The guard, an older black man named James, smiled at Joe and gave him a small wave with his wrinkled hand today. "Good luck up there, young man, because something tells me today is going to be a very interesting day for everyone around here." Joe smiled back and wondered if James somehow knew what was about to happen upstairs in the fancy boardroom on the top floor. The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt longer than usual, and Joe used the time to steady his breathing and calm his nerves. He thought about his grandfather, about his mother, about all the people who had believed in him when nobody else would give him a chance. The doors opened with a soft chime, and Joe stepped out onto the executive floor where everything was quiet and expensive looking. The boardroom was behind heavy wooden doors that looked like they cost more than a small car sitting in a parking lot. Joe had never been inside before today, but he knew exactly where to go because he had memorized the building plans weeks ago. He pushed open the doors and stepped inside just as the board members were taking their seats around the long, polished table. Michael Harrington was already at the head of the table, shuffling papers and talking to his chief financial officer about something boring. He looked up when the door opened, and his face twisted into an ugly expression when he saw who had walked in uninvited. "What are you doing here? And who let you into this room? Because this is a closed meeting for executives only today." Joe walked to the far end of the table and pulled out a chair that was waiting there empty for someone to sit down. "I received an invitation to attend this meeting, sir, and I believe my presence here today is required by company rules." The other board members looked at each other with confused faces, because none of them recognized the young black man in the cheap suit. There were 7 of them around the table, all white, all over 50 years old, all wearing watches that cost more than nice cars. Michael slammed his hand down on the table hard enough to make the water glasses shake and rattle against each other loudly. "I am calling security right now to have you removed from this building, and I will make sure you never work anywhere again." Joe reached into his messenger bag and pulled out a thick stack of papers held together with a black binder clip on top. "Before you do that, sir, I think you should take a look at these documents that I brought here today with me for everyone." He slid the papers across the polished table, and they stopped right in front of Michael Harrington with perfect aim and precision. Michael looked down at the papers like they might bite him if he touched them with his fingers or even got too close to them. His chief financial officer, a nervous man named Douglas, picked them up instead and started reading with wide eyes and a pale face. The room went very quiet, the kind of quiet that happens right before something big is about to explode into a million pieces. Douglas cleared his throat and looked at Michael with a face that had gone pale as a white sheet of paper in a printer. "Sir, these are stock certificates and trust documents, and they appear to be very real and very legal according to my reading here." Michael grabbed the papers from Douglas and started flipping through them fast, his hands shaking just a little bit now with fear. "This is fake. This is some kind of scam, because Benjamin Anana had no family left when he died last year all alone." Joe leaned back in his chair and folded his hands in front of him on the table like he had all day to wait. Benjamin Anana had a daughter named Patricia, who was my mother, and she passed away when I was 10 years old back then. One of the board members, a woman named Elizabeth Powell with silver hair and sharp eyes, leaned forward to look at Joe more carefully. I remember Patricia Anana because I met her once at a company party many years ago when she was just a teenager back then. Michael threw the papers down on the table and stood up so fast that his chair rolled backward and crashed into the wall behind him. I do not care who this person claims to be, because he has no right to be in this meeting here today with the rest of us. Joe stood up too, and even though he was younger and smaller, something in his eyes made Michael take a step back from him. I own 41% of this company, sir, which makes me the single largest shareholder at this table right now today in this room. The room erupted into noise, with board members talking over each other and reaching for the documents to see them closer for themselves. Michael Harrington stood frozen at the head of the table, his face turning red and then purple with rage and fear and confusion. This is impossible, because I had lawyers check the ownership structure when I took over as CEO 8 years ago back then. Joe pulled another document from his bag, this one with a gold seal at the bottom that looked very official and completely real. My grandfather placed the shares in a blind trust that was not visible on any public records until I turned 23 years old. Elizabeth Powell was reading the trust document now, her lawyer eyes scanning every line with careful attention to every single detail on the page. This is legitimate, Michael, and this young man is telling the truth about his ownership of our company here today in front of us. Michael pointed his finger at Joe, and his voice came out loud and harsh like a dog barking at a stranger on the street. I will fight this in court for years, and I will bury you in legal fees until you have nothing left to your name. Joe smiled, and it was not a friendly smile this time, but something colder and harder than ice on a winter morning outside. I thought you might say that, sir, which is why I brought one more thing to share with everyone here today in this room. He pulled out a small device from his pocket, a digital recorder about the size of a pack of gum that fit perfectly in his palm. Over the past 3 weeks, I have recorded 17 different conversations that show you stealing money from this company through fake contracts and deals. The color drained from Michael Harrington's face so fast that he looked like a ghost standing there in his expensive tailored suit. Douglas, the chief financial officer, actually stood up and moved away from Michael like he was scared to be too close to him now. Joe pressed play on the recorder, and Michael's voice filled the room, loud and clear and impossible to deny or explain away. Just add another $200,000 to the consulting fee, and make sure the money goes to my personal account offshore today without any records. The recording played for 3 more minutes, showing deal after deal where Michael had stolen money from Apex Industries for himself and his friends. The total amount was over $12 million, taken bit by bit over the past 5 years. He had been serving as CEO of the company. Elizabeth Powell was the first board member to speak when the recording finally stopped playing in the silent room full of shocked faces. Michael Harrington, you are hereby removed from your position as CEO, effective immediately as of right now today in this meeting. The other board members nodded their heads in agreement, their faces hard and angry as they looked at the man they had trusted for years. Michael lunged across the table toward Joe, his hands reaching out like claws to grab the young man by his throat and squeeze hard. But Joe was faster, and he stepped aside smoothly while security guards rushed through the doors to stop the attack before anyone got hurt. 2 guards grabbed Michael by the arms and held him still, while he screamed and fought against their strong grip with all his strength. You cannot do this to me, because I built this company into what it is today with my own hands and my own hard work. Joe walked around the table until he was standing right in front of Michael, close enough to see the sweat dripping down his forehead. No, sir, my grandfather built this company from nothing, and you just stole from it while pretending to be something you are not at all. Michael spit at Joe, but the guards pulled him back before it could land anywhere near the young man standing so calm and still. You think you can come in here with your cheap suit and your recordings, and take everything I have worked for all these years away from me." Joe wiped his face with a handkerchief from his pocket and looked at Michael with eyes that showed no fear and no anger at all. "I am not taking anything that belongs to you, sir, because none of this was ever yours to begin with in the first place at all." Guards dragged Michael Harrington out of the boardroom, his expensive shoes sliding across the carpet as he cursed and shouted terrible things. His voice echoed down the hallway even after the doors closed behind him, screaming about lawyers and revenge, and how this was not over yet. The remaining board members sat in stunned silence, staring at Joe like they were seeing him for the very first time in their lives. Elizabeth Powell cleared her throat and stood up from her chair at the table with grace and dignity in every movement she made standing there. "Mr. Anana, on behalf of the board, I would like to apologize for what you experienced in your time here as an intern working for us." Joe shook his head and held up his hand to stop her from saying anything more about the past 3 weeks he had spent watching everything. "There is no need to apologize to me, ma'am, because I learned exactly what I needed to know about this company and the people running it." He turned to face all of the board members, and his voice was strong and steady like a man who knew exactly what he wanted to do. "I will be taking over as CEO of Apex Industries, starting today, and I have some changes in mind for how we do things around here." Douglas raised his hand like a nervous student in a classroom, his voice shaking just a little bit when he finally spoke up to ask his question. "What kind of changes are you thinking about making here at the company, sir? If I may ask you that question right now today." Joe walked to the window and looked out at the city spread below them like a map made of glass and steel and concrete and dreams. "We are going to start a program to hire 100 young people from communities that have been ignored and overlooked for far too long now." He turned back to face the board, and his eyes were bright with something that looked like hope and determination mixed together into something powerful. "We are going to pay everyone a fair wage for their work, and we are going to treat people with respect no matter what their job title says." Elizabeth Powell smiled, and it was the first real smile anyone had seen in that boardroom in a very long time indeed around here. "Your grandfather would be proud of you, Joe, because those are the exact same values he built this company on when he started it originally." Joe nodded and took his seat at the head of the table, the same seat where Michael had sat just 15 minutes ago feeling so powerful. "I have one more announcement to make before we move on to the regular business of this meeting here today with all of you listening." He pulled out a final document from his bag, this one with the Apex Industries logo printed at the top in bold blue letters that everyone recognized. "I am donating $5 million of my personal shares to create a scholarship fund for first-generation college students all across the country starting this year." The board members looked at each other, and for the first time, they seemed to understand exactly who Joe Anana really was deep inside. He was not just the grandson of the founder, and he was not just a young man who had been treated badly by a cruel boss. He was someone who wanted to use his power and his money to help other people who had been forgotten and left behind by the world. The meeting continued for another 2 hours, with Joe outlining his plans for the company and answering questions from the board members patiently and clearly. By the time it was over, everyone in that room knew that Apex Industries was about to change in ways they had never imagined possible before today. Joe walked out of the boardroom and headed toward the elevator, his messenger bag feeling lighter now that all the documents had been delivered safely. Sarah Chen was waiting for him by the elevator doors, her eyes wide and her mouth hanging open in shock at what she had just heard about everything. "Is it true what everyone is saying, that you are the grandson of Benjamin Anana, and you own almost half of the entire company now?" Joe smiled at her and pressed the button to call the elevator up to the 40th floor, where they were both standing together right now. "It is true, Sarah, and I want to thank you for being kind to me when nobody else in this building would even look at me." Sarah shook her head and laughed, the sound bright and happy in the quiet hallway where executives usually walked with serious faces and important frowns. I just treated you like a human being, Joe, because that is what my parents taught me to do with everyone I meet in life. The elevator doors opened, and Joe stepped inside, then turned around to look at Sarah with a thoughtful expression on his young face today. How would you like to be the new head of the finance department, Sarah? Because I am going to need people I can trust around me here. Sarah's mouth fell open again, and she stepped into the elevator just before the doors closed behind her with a soft whooshing sound in the air. Are you serious right now, Joe? Because I have only been working here for 2 years, and there are people with much more experience than me. Joe pressed the button for the lobby and leaned against the wall of the elevator as it started moving down toward the ground floor below them. Experience is important, Sarah, but character is more important, and you showed me your character on my very first day working here at this company. The elevator ride down was quiet, but it was a comfortable quiet, the kind that happens between two people who understand each other without needing words. When they reached the lobby, Joe walked over to the security desk where James was still sitting and watching the monitors with his careful old eyes. James, I want to thank you for always being kind to me when I came in every morning, because it meant more than you will ever know. James stood up from his chair and shook Joe's hand with a grip that was still strong despite his age and all the years he had worked here. I knew there was something special about you, young man, from the very first day you walked through those doors with your head held high like that. Joe reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope that he had prepared earlier that morning, before coming to work for the big meeting today. This is a bonus for you, James, and I want you to know that your job here is safe for as long as you want to keep working at this company. James opened the envelope, and his eyes went wide when he saw the check inside for $50,000 with his name written on the line. Mr. Anana, I cannot accept this much money from you, because I was just doing my job and treating you the way I treat everyone else here. Joe closed James's hand around the envelope and shook his head with a smile that showed he was not going to take no for an answer today. You treated me like a person when other people treated me like I was invisible, and that is worth more than any amount of money in the world. James wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and nodded, too emotional to speak any more words right now in this moment between them. 1 week later, the news had spread across the entire country, and reporters from every major network wanted to interview the young man who had taken over Apex Industries. Joe stood at a podium in front of the company headquarters, surrounded by cameras and microphones, and people shouting questions at him from every direction possible. Mr. Anana, how does it feel to go from being an ignored intern to being the CEO of a company worth almost $4 billion today? Joe leaned into the microphone and spoke clearly so that everyone watching at home could hear every single word he was about to say to them. It feels like a responsibility, because my grandfather built this company to help people, and I plan to honor his memory by doing the same thing he did. Another reporter pushed forward with her microphone extended toward Joe like a weapon, her voice sharp and demanding as she asked her question next in line. What do you say to people who think you only got this position because of your family connections, and not because of your own hard work and talent? Joe smiled and nodded, because he had expected this question and had prepared his answer carefully over the past week while everything was happening so fast. I would say that I spent 3 weeks being ignored and insulted in my own grandfather's company before anyone knew who I really was inside and outside. He paused and looked directly into the camera, speaking to everyone watching at home who had ever felt invisible or unimportant in their own lives and jobs. I know what it feels like to be judged by how you look or what job you have, and I promise to never make anyone feel that way here. The crowd of reporters went quiet for a moment, and then the questions started again, coming faster and louder than before from every direction at once. Joe handled them all with the same calm and steady voice that he had used in the boardroom when he confronted Michael Harrington face to face. Behind him, through the glass doors of the lobby, Sarah Chen and James, the security guard, watched with proud smiles on their faces as Joe spoke to the world.